And I would like to introduce our guest speaker tonight, Rhoades.
Come on, you gotta tell what I'm doing. Well, okay, my name is Chrissy Rhoades. You probably know me as Chrissy Rhoades. And I'm the gal that does a lot of these historical uploads with pictures and a little bit of history of whatever. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, okay? And how I got started doing this. Now, we moved to Brunswick in 1961, and we moved over on Samuel Drive. So those of you that have been in Brunswick a long time will know that that's one of the older areas of Brunswick. It was a horseshoe, Samuel and Vincent Drive. And you may not know, and probably you do, I'm probably the last one to know this, but it was, let me see if I can read this without my back, Vincent Murata and Samuel Glazer started a company in 1949, and they were from the Cleveland area, but they saw that Brunswick was growing by leaps and bounds and said, that's where the money's at. Let's go out there and start building. And they built the homes that were basementless, two-bedroom homes. They were around $8,000 unfinished inside. For $8,000, you could buy this two-bedroom basementless home. Now those same homes are selling for what, a couple $100,000? Okay, so when we first moved to Brunswick couldn't figure out what school to send us to. And do you know I was to every single school in Brunswick? So I started out at Applewood. Now mind you, I still lived on Samuel Drive. The next year they sent me to Crestview. Okay, I guess I'm gonna settle in at Crescent. No, the next year, still living on Samuel Drive, they decided we're gonna send you to Towsley. Well, by 1965, my parents had contracted with Buckeye Landing Construction, if anybody recognizes that name. They were builders in the 60s in Brunswick. And the new house was ready on Alice Avenue, off of Hancock Road. So the next year, guess where I went? Grafton. Well, did I stay at Grafton? No, because the next year after that, I went uptown to, what was it, the middle school, but it housed the 8th grade. The next year, I went to the old high school, which housed the 9th graders. And the year after that, I went to the new high school off of Route 303. So I was to every school in the system because they just couldn't figure out where, but Brunswick was growing so fast through the school systems, couldn't keep up with all the kids, as you guys know. Okay, so we moved over to Alice, and after I went to every single school, oh, by the way, the Mr. Vincent Murata, he is the one that invented Mr. Coffee. And he invented it in 1968, but it wasn't marketed until 1972. And I happened to have a Mr. Coffee maker. I had a couple of them at one time. When it fizzled out, I'd go buy another one. So. Okay, so I graduated in 1971. I went to school with Dave Chitsey, Carol Chitsey, the Chitseys. Carol Chitsey! All right, well, I went to school with you. And, let's see, I got married not too long out of school. I was a very good little housewife. I had my wedding reception right here. I married a Brunswick boy, and I divorced him. And I married me another Brunswick boy. And guess where the reception was at? Right here. But I'm going to hang on to this Brunswick boy. I've been with him for 30-some years, and I told him, you're stuck with me. So, after I had gotten divorced, I was working at a camera store. I worked at Dodge Camera. I worked at Modern Camera in Parma Heights. And I eventually got into computers. I thought, boy, I like this even better than I do photography. So I started learning what have you. And I got me a job in Elyria at an internet company, and I did tech support. And in 2006, after dial-up, that's what it was that we offered, when that started dying out, I jumped over to Lorraine Community College, and I've been there ever since. I teach in the computing department. I teach basic computer, and I also teach advanced computing to fix your computer. I don't do coding or anything like that. I don't play games. It's strictly work on a computer, how to use it and how to fix it. Okay, so how did I get into this? Well, in 2019, you may remember the pandemic hit, everything closed down. There was just nothing going on, and I was bored to tears. Now, in school, I didn't like history. And when I was a kid growing up and somebody would say, well, this used to be an apple farm, and there was a farmhouse, it would go in one ear and out the other. I didn't care. But I started getting interested in what was Brunswick like when, before I even came to Brunswick, what was going on there. So I started investigating, and I came across these old pictures. Now, I have 3 books that have been of such tremendous help to me. I have the 1965 sexquentennial book that was put out. Okay, that has a lot of good information. I don't really know who wrote it. I think it was just a compendium of
Marion Wolf and Friends.
I know Alan Wolf did the foreword in it. I remember that.
His wife and friends.
Okay, and friends. All right, the next book I have is Images of Brunswick by Amy Zalakis. I hope I'm pronouncing her last name correctly. That's another book, great photos, and a little bit of, interesting whatever about that photo. And then the last book that I have is Our Hometown by our own Sam Boyer, and that has helped me a lot. So yes, give her a hand. So those books have been a tremendous help to help me get a handle on what was Brunswick like, what was going on, who were the people that came before us and settled this place. So I started investigating, and I realized that there was a wealth of information to be had in old newspapers. I am not kidding you. So there are a couple of newspaper sites that you can subscribe to, and you can read all the back issues of the Medina County Gazette back to 1860. There was the Medina Sentinel that was out then. So I've gotten a lot of information out of these newspaper articles that I've read. And you would not believe what has went on in Brunswick before we were even thought of. Now, I've uploaded quite a bit throughout the year. So this kept me busy doing this, and I will be interested, and I'm saying to my husband, Dan, oh, guess what I just found out about Brunswick. And I knew once my classes resumed, I wouldn't have time to do it every night, but I still try to do enough load at least once a week, because my classes take up so much of my time. But I still love doing the history. For instance, I came across an article. It was in the newspaper for way over a year. Those of you that have been reading my posts, you may remember that I posted information about a feud that went on in Brunswick between the people that had Mapleside and the people that lived across the street. Now, Mapleside, as you know, the land was owned by Tillotson, and he actually had built this little cabin, and then all of a sudden he's selling fruits, vegetables, what have you, a roadside stand right in front of his cabin. Well, Pearl Road was called the, Cleveland Wooster Turnpike. It was the main route from Cleveland all the way down to Wooster. So we've got a lot of traffic. It was the main road. And across the street, well, Tillotson sold it to Eisen. Across the street from Eisen was a man named Frank Harper. And Frank Harper had 250 acres, and it was a hog farm. Well, we know hogs will eat anything, right? I mean, they say if you want to get rid of a body, put it in a hog pen, they'll eat everything but the teeth. Now, I don't know this from personal use, I was asking for a friend, no. But he had these hogs, and he hit on a novel way to feed them. He contracted with Cleveland Heights to have their garbage brought out to his farm, which his farm bordered on Boston Road and 42. And right now, this is where like Skyview apartments, Hickory Hills apartments, and some of the houses down into there. So, he had the garbage delivered, and you know, since the road was busy and people were stopping at this vegetable stand, the stink was horrendous. So Eisen complained about it, and he wanted him to stop having his garbage delivered. Well, Frank Harper, no, he wasn't going to do that. Well, in retaliation, Eisen posted, he had a great big billboard made up on the end of his property facing Pearl Road, and it said, it said, entering Medina County, home of the garbage-fed hogs, the garbage dumping ground for Cuyahoga County. And it was a huge billboard. And he actually had people posted with a shotgun to keep others from vandalizing and wanting to, tear the sign down. So he posted guards with guns, honestly. All right, well, that didn't go over so well with Mr. Harper. Now, Mr. Harper and Mr. Eisen were back and forth in court all this year. This happened in 1938. So, in retaliation for this sign and Eisen wanting him to stop having the garbage delivered for his pigs, he said, okay, I'm going to buy voting booths. Does anybody know what the little shed voting booths were? They were little sheds that people went in to cast their ballot. Now, as they got away from using these voting sheds, people brought them onto their property and would store their tools and what have you. But Mr. Harper said, I'm going to buy these voting booths, and I'm bringing them on my property. He let all of his hired help go, and he brought in Negroes. And he said, I'm going to make a Negro community. The voting booths will be the houses, the places that these black people live. And I've already got a name picked out for the community. I am going to call it Ison, I-S-O-N. Well, that went over like a lead balloon, and guess what? They're back in court. So, it was such a long story that I had to, I divvied it up into 3 parts. So if there is a conclusion, if you want to know what the conclusion is, go to the website, you know you're from Brunswick if, that's on Facebook, and look under memories. Part 3, you'll be able to find out what happened. Did the Ison community take hold? Did Mr. Eisen take his billboard down? So that's how I got started, and I hope to be able to continue. I still have a lot of material, I find a lot of the pictures online. I found them in some unique places too. eBay. I have found some of the photos in eBay. I think I found the last one through Amazon. And a lot of the pictures are in the newspapers. So if you want to subscribe, one of the sites is called newspaperarchive.com. And I think it's, I don't know, $150 a year, something like that. And you can read all these back issues, and you would not believe. If you think Brunswick was a boring little community, think again, read some of these newspapers. So that's all I have. So if anybody has questions or wants to, ask me something or wants to make a comment.
What gave you the idea to put it online?
Well, I'm online every day, okay? I'm on the computer every single day. And during the pandemic, and I was bored, I said, oh, let's go over and see what my community's doing, because my heart is in Brunswick. I don't care if you can take me to Hawaii and I can live in the most beautiful mansion, but my heart is here in Brunswick. Basically, I'm Samuel and Alice Drive. So I just thought, boy, this is some really good stuff. I can't keep this to myself. Let me upload some of this and see what the group thinks. And I do notice that sometimes there's some bickering in the group, and I thought, well, maybe this will take their mind off of whether somebody didn't, they went under a yellow light or they didn't stop fast enough. Because, you hear it all on this site. So I thought, let me just, see what kind of a reception there is to this. And everybody seemed to like it, so I kept doing it. And I've met a lot of good people, a lot of wonderful people. So it's enriched my life a lot. I've not only learned a lot about the history of Brunswick, but I've met a lot of you through this website, this Facebook, and I just think it's wonderful.
I'm not on Facebook.
Okay?
How can I look at your book? I had a link once to somebody and saw some of it one time, but I didn't get on.
I don't post it anywhere but on Facebook. Nowhere but on Facebook, so I do not have a website.
I'm wondering if there'd be a way you could bring from the library and have a day where they can show Facebook and show it to people that would know. Just in one of the community rooms, there might be a way to get people that
If you go into the computer, onto your, just search in Google or whatever you use, and put in, you're from Brunswick,
Okay.
and then scroll down and find Chrissy, and then you'll be able to click at her,
But you're talking on Facebook now,
right, and you can do that,
right?
because it's public, and it's not
It's not private, it's for everybody, it's, whenever you post, it's for everybody at large, it's not private.
Well, I got there once, but I can't figure out how to, because I keep trying today, and I shouldn't find it.
Yeah, you don't have to be a member of Facebook right now. Well, you do have to sign up for an account to be able to get on, but it's free. It's free, and you know what? If you have 5-year-old grandkids, those kids know more about a computer than I do.
The library should be able to help.
When people, because I repair computers out of my home, and when people will call me and I'll try to explain something to them and they're just not getting it, I'll say, do you have any grandkids? Well, yes, as a matter I do. I have a 7-year-old. They'll be able to help you. Because these kids, they're born into computers. They know. I mean, I didn't have anything like a computer. I didn't even have an adding machine growing up. I had to do it all on paper. But, it was just so interesting to me.
Chrissy, the first time I met you, you said that you had ties to the Historical Society site because...
I did. Well, my grandmother, there's a little shack that's still there. I know, but it looks terrible. It's a little box that my grandmother lived in, and it was next to Mary Groening's farmhouse. So my grandmother was friends with Mary Groening, and she would go over to visit. Well, I have an aunt that's close to my age, so we kind of ran around together as teenagers. And when we need to go find Granny, it's like, oh, she's probably over at Mary's. So off we go over to Mary's, and there she'd be sitting at the kitchen table with Mary, having coffee and talking. So it seemed so odd to me to go back into that house as a museum when I had been there when Mary lived there and was friends with my grandmother.
And the same stove is still there.
Yes, yes. Yeah, and you know what, it looks pretty much the same to me. So, yeah, that was kind of interesting when I found out that, oh, that's the historical society. So I said to my aunt, do you know that they made that into a historical society? She said, you're kidding.
What was your last name then, and your grandparents' name?
I went to school under the last name of Chaw, C-H-A-W. That was, my parents' name. It actually is Italian. Now you say, how does Chaw? It sounds more Chinese. But what happened was when my parents came over to Ellis Island, they couldn't speak any English. And they would ask you your name, your nationality, and all these questions. So, Italians speak fast. And they asked, what's your last name? And my grandmother said, Jotti. And he heard Cha. It's C-I-O-T-T-I, Jotti. But he heard Cha, so we ended up as Cha in America, C-H-A-W. So, that's the story on that. Yep.
So had you ever been in any of the other buildings at the farm before?
No. Well, when Dan and I came during one of the farmers market, yeah, then I went into it for the first time. But yeah, and that had been the first time I was back in Mary's house in years and years. It was interesting.
Now, Jim Hayes, who's the former superintendent, is here. He can tell you why you were traveling from school to school.
So you knew my father.
I don't know why you were traveling, but I know why I was traveling. I was traveling when you were saying that. I was living the same thing. In fact, one year I had school at the old town hall. The building, so
I didn't get there.
See the nodding heads? Yeah, these are all the generation where we were growing at the rate of one elementary school a year. We just couldn't build them fast.
Right, and they just didn't know where to put us. So, 3 different schools in 3 different years, and then we moved over to Alice. Okay, I can understand that. We were close to Grafton, which is now Walter Kidder, whatever. But it's like, why did they Applewood and then Crestview and Taos? We never moved. We stayed in the same spot. But they just didn't know what to do with us. Like you say, we were growing faster. There were more kids than there was schoolroom.
Yep.
So, yeah. And I was privileged to be able to go to the new high school, which was over on 303. The very second year it was open, I was there. So it was still new. It was still
Did you
very
ride
new.
the bus to all these different schools?
Yeah, we did. I never walked, even on Alice, which the kids that live over there now that go to the high school, they walk. But we did not. We had the school bus for every single school I ever went to. School bus.
Thank God for school buses.
And the drivers, absolutely, and the drivers. But Mr. Hayes, you must remember my father. He was a hall monitor. He always talked about you. Ernie Chaw.
Ernie.
Oh, yeah, sure. Oh, yeah.
That was my dad.
He was a very nice man.
Thank you. Yeah, he had, retired from Chevy, and then he went to the school and worked there another 17 years.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he was from the generation that he was working ever since he was like 14 years old, and he just didn't know when to quit. He finally retired for good. I don't know how old he was, probably close to 80, if not in his 80s, but, yep. All right. Well, thank you. You've been a wonderful audience. Thank you so much. And I will will.
So feel free to talk. Our current superintendent, Mr. Niedermeyer, is here, and Don Allerley's son is